If it's on you, that's on you. If you're suffering because of your own sin, that's you. But if it's because of Christ, he says, do not be ashamed. That'll be the temptation, won't it? You've been there. Even just conversations, knowing that you'll be ridiculed, and so you back up. Or maybe the Lord lays a little softball right before you to share the gospel, and you're ashamed. That's the temptation. And Peter knew temptation very well, right? Tempted 3 times. And Luke tells us that as Peter, on that 3rd time, as he denied his Lord, the Lord looked at him. And I think that set Peter on a new trajectory. Then you have the resurrection and the ascension, and after that, Peter is unashamed, isn't he? That's what we see in the first chapters of Acts. Something changed, and it was the resurrection of Jesus, so much so that they get beaten by the Jewish leaders, and what do they say? They rejoice because they were counted worthy to suffer for the sake of the name. They were unashamed. They just love him so much that they're thankful to be associated with him, unashamed. And Peter, even till his dying breath, he died crucified upside down because of his faith. And many in the early church have done the same, unashamed. Ignatius of Antioch in the 2nd century, in his letter to the Romans, early church leader, he knew his fate, and here's what he said. He says, bring on the fire. Bring on the cross. Bring on the hordes of wild animals. Let them wrench my bones out of socket and mangle my limbs and grind up my whole body. Bring on all the hideous tortures from the devil. Just let me get to Jesus Christ. Nothing on this wide earth matters to me anymore. The kingdoms of this world are entirely meaningless. I am at the point where I would rather die for Jesus than rule over the whole earth. He alone is the one I seek, the one who died for us. It is Jesus that I long for, the one who for our sake rose again from the dead. Ignatius was torn apart by wild animals for the amusement of the Romans in the infamous Colosseum. Justin Martyr, 2nd century as well, whipped, beheaded. Perpetua in the late 2nd century was tortured. She also was in an arena for the amusement of the Romans. And the way she was to die, many had died actually before her in the arena, and there was this massive, fierce heifer that would come and maul her to death. And she gets knocked down the first time, and her hair fell down. And she gets up, and she puts her hair back up. She finds her pin, and she puts her hair back up. Because in that culture, you took your hair down to mourn. And Perpetua wanted the audience to know this is not a time of mourning. This is a time of rejoicing. And she puts her hair back up and is mauled again, and eventually ends up have a sword at her heart, and she takes the blade for this little trembling Roman guard and puts it at her throat. And she dies unashamed for the cause of Christ. Origen, the 2nd century and the 3rd century, tortured to death. Also in the 2nd century, Polycarp, he was asked by the Romans to reject Christ and worship the Roman emperor, and he said, 86 years I've served him, and he never did me any injury. How then can I blaspheme my king and my savior? And they said, all you have to do is say, away with the atheists. Of course, the Romans called the Christians atheists because Christians only worshiped the Lord instead of all the false gods. And so they told Polycarp, if you'll just say, away with the atheists, we'll let you go. And he looks over to the Romans and says, away with the atheists. And he's burned at the stake for his faith. Unashamed. As Tertullian said, another early church father, the leg doesn't feel the chain when the mind is in heaven. They were unashamed. Brothers and sisters, we have many, many examples. Peter has given us Jesus. We know of Peter himself. We know of church history. When we're insulted, when we suffer, let us not be ashamed. Let us rejoice.